Good evening, YouTubers. Well, I've been talking about the justice system and crime and punishment and stuff like this, and it's been quite popular. And I'm still on that subject. And over the years, there's been various ways of detecting crime and punishing criminals and the likes. And various techniques over the years have been considered a bit dodgy. And so they've been brought on top by people going, that's not on, that's not on. And they've gone, oh, right, we'll change it, we'll do something else and do something else. And I'm going to talk about two people who, if you live in America, you've probably never heard of. One of them is Dick Turpin, and the other is Guy Fawkes. Now, everybody in the UK has heard of Dick Turpin. He was like, I think we're going back to the 1730s now. He was what they called a highwayman. You know, he had a hat and a mask and they pointed a gun at you and said, stand and deliver. It was his line. Basically, he was an armed robber who used to stop people in the street, wherever, on the road, going somewhere, because there was no street lights in those days, in the dark, and he'd stick a gun in your face and say, give me all your money. So he was a robber. Like what Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, I mean, that was much later, wasn't it, in America, but they must have had robbers. And he was called a highwayman. He was a notorious highwayman. There was even a TV series in the UK, Dick Turpin. Every Sunday night, I think there was an episode of Dick Turpin. And he was a brave, dashing hero. Even the Gainsborough movies, what was it called? The Wicked Lady. Do you remember The Wicked Lady? James Mason. I'm James Mason. I'm the highwayman. Oh, I can't remember what he was called. But he was the brave, dashing highwayman. And there was Margaret Lockwood. Proper big. It wasn't Hollywood, it was British movie, but it was a big hit in the day. And him and her were riding through the moonlit night, robbing people. So apart from the dramatic side of things, you know, the romantic side of things, he was a robber and he was reputed to have shot at least 2 people. He has a wiki page, you can look him up. So robbing people and shooting people, I mean, that doesn't go down well in court. And when they finally caught up with him, they nicked him for stealing 2 horses. So the robbery and the shooting people had nothing to do with it. They just nicked him for stealing 2 horses and they hanged him. And that was the end of him. And you think, well, I would have liked to have had that court case televised and gone into the details of it and looked, because if you televise a court case, you've got a camera that's on the accused the whole time, okay, and you're looking at his expressions and when various bits of evidence are revealed, you know, how does he react? Body language guy would be on that, wouldn't he? And of course you've got another camera on the witnesses in the witness box, and then there's the jury. They're all there, aren't they? Because a lot of them... Have you seen 12 Angry Men, the film with Henry Fonda? Really good film. I think that the jury, while they're considering their verdict, should be televised, because no one can get to them. They're isolated, aren't they? They're in a room and they're discussing stuff. And if they're all in there saying, look, I've got to go home, I want to see the football, fuck him, just find him guilty. If they're all saying that, then, oh, the whole world is watching, isn't it? That's why they don't televise it, that's why they won't let you see. But if the cameras are in that room and they're all sitting there, they've got to be sensible about it, haven't they? They can't come out with shite like, oh, my dinner's ready, I'm on a promise, I said I'd take the missus out. You've got to be there debating the evidence and discussing it rationally and reasonably. And the whole world's watching, I mean, you know the whole world's watching, so you've got to treat it sensibly and properly, because you know you will be criticised for it later, but it's all anonymity, isn't it? Oh no, you can't see who they are. Why? Anyway, the other guy was Guy Fawkes. Now, if you're an American, you might not have heard of Guy Fawkes. You probably will have done. He's quite a famous person. Every year, it was the law, okay, every year on November the 5th, you had to make an effigy of Guy Fawkes, right, and put him on the bonfire and burn him. It's a bit harsh, wasn't it? Poor old Guy, what did Guy ever do? Well, I'll tell you what Guy did. Guy was a mercenary who was hired by someone. Because usually what happens with mercenaries, you get hired and paid by someone to do something that's a bit dodgy. Okay, but the person at the top doesn't want the mercenary to know who he is. So what they usually do is they have someone in the middle, the middleman, who says, can't say, top secret, hush hush, you can't see who the proper person is who's given. Anyway, they give these people all the money. They say, there's the deal, we want you to blow up the Houses of Parliament in the UK. Cut a long story short, they all got caught by King James. King James just decided the night before Parliament was going to meet, and everyone, the royal family, everyone was going to be in the Parliament. And the gunpowder plotters, Guy Fawkes and his mercenaries, had packed the cellar full of gunpowder, which had been provided by this anonymous person. And King James was not having a good time with Parliament at that time. He came down from Scotland. He was the King of Scotland, King James the VI of Scotland, I believe. Might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. Elizabeth I died, and they said to him, why don't you come down to England and be King of England and Scotland and then form the United Kingdom, because it was two kingdoms before that. And he was a bit dodgy, this guy. They said, thing is, we don't want any Catholics on the throne of England. Are you a Catholic, James? Because all your family are Catholics, and you've been Catholics for years. And he went, no, I'm a Scottish Presbyterian, as a matter of fact. And they went, oh, okay then, well, you can come down. Anyway, he was a Catholic. And he wasn't getting on very well with Parliament, and they didn't like him at all, and there was lots of heat. And then he couldn't get any of his way in Parliament. He was trying to get them to give him this, that and the other, and he was getting nowhere fast. And then one day he came rushing in and had the cellars searched the day before Parliament was going to meet. And they exposed all this gunpowder and these plotters. They all had them arrested, and they had them tortured and stretched and poked and things, and get them to confess, which they all confessed, because you do eventually when you're being tortured. And but they couldn't say who had hired them because they didn't know. They knew the middleman, but the middleman had been paid off and he'd gone. He'd done one. So they never got to find out that it was King James I who had actually hired them in the first place. Now, you won't find this in the history books. I'm a villain, right? And I know it was him. And this is my this is my opinion, okay? So that's where I'm coming from. And when they had the Crown Court trial, they're like, conspirators, evil conspirators. And they were all executed horribly. And King James was the toast of Parliament, and he got all his things through, and he had his own way about loads of things, and he was dead chuffed, and he thinks, yes, I'm marvellous, aren't I? Thank you very much. His family were cursed, though, after that. Another of his ancestors sort of had his head chopped off, and eventually the British people got so sick of the Stuarts that they just ran them out of town, and they've never darkened the throne since. But if they had cameras in the courtroom, cameras didn't exist back in those days, but it would have been a kangaroo court, because the people would have been dragged into the courtroom. Evil. We find you all guilty. So, but obviously it was a kangaroo court, wasn't it? Because they knew all along they were set up for a fall. And they made it the law because they've obviously burned these people on the 5th of November. And they obviously made it a law that everyone had to build a bonfire on the 5th of November and have a bonfire celebration, burn an effigy of Guy Fawkes, who was the ringleader of the gunpowder plot. Now everybody in Britain knows that, everybody. Okay, so it's nothing new to those people, but like I say, people in America might not have a clue what I'm talking about. But behind closed doors, you can commit all kinds of atrocities that you're not going to tell people about. Oh yeah, this happened and that happened, didn't it? Didn't it? Yeah, yeah. Oh, it did. Yes, yes. So I'm not into any of that. I'm into transparency. I want cameras in that court looking at everyone and analysing everything. And even the jury, when the jury's considering its verdict, I want that televised as well. For obvious reasons. Now, if you feel that that's not a good choice and we shouldn't do that, please feel free to tell me why. Thanks for watching.